Good day everyone, today we'll be taking a nice quick look at the revolutions available to you as the Italians. First off, we have the Barbary States Revolution, where all of your villagers turn into Barbary warriors. Barbary warriors that cost food. Also, after you send your citizenship card, all of your villagers will be back to costing food. With this revolution, you instantly gain access to a large number of cheap melee infantry that can perform decently well in the mid-game, which helps to fill up a hole in the Italian roster. Because while the Italians can send their Papal Guard units, those units don't arrive till their shipment arrives, and they can be a tiny bit pricey, whereas each of your Barbary warriors only costs food, so as long as you have a bunch of mills working, and you can keep on producing more and more Barbary warriors. And this works out pretty well for the Italians, because the Italians have access to some pretty good ranged units, such as their Pavis. Another neat little thing is that there's a card that you can send that lets their Pavis do more damage against buildings, and also with the Barbary States, your infantry automatically do double damage against buildings and enemy villagers. So if you send your Pavis and you've also sent the card that lets you do bonus damage against buildings with your Pavis, then your Pavis can take down buildings pretty quick, which then synergizes with a Barbary States card that lets you gain gold by destroying buildings. So as you completely destroy your enemy's base using your Falconets and your Barbary Corsairs and any other units that you've built so far in the match, every time that you destroy one of those, after you send the same card that gives you a captain, you'll be getting a gold bounty from that, which will help to fill out your economy and let you continue to build units after you revolt as the Barbary States Revolution. This revolution is a decent revolution because it gives you good, hard-hitting melee infantry, and also, this revolution is a great option for naval maps. Since you have cards that let you send Seebeck warships, also you can get a lot of food through fishing ships on naval maps, which will help you as the Barbary States Revolution, since your Barbary warriors and your villagers both cost food. Also, after you send that card that lets you get a bounty from destroying enemy buildings to get that extra gold bounty, that gold bounty will also take effect if you destroy enemy fishing ships. The Barbary States Revolution is definitely one that I would recommend, especially if you're going against Malta, because Malta loves to put down a lot of buildings, and all of those buildings will give you coin after you send that card that gives you that gold bounty by destroying buildings. So the entire base of a multiplayer is basically one big coin mine if you go with the Barbary States Revolution. Next up we have Argentina, which is the revolution that is famous for your Granaderos. Your Granaderos are basically mounted grenadiers that have the mobility of a Comanchero, but they can also throw grenades. With this revolution, you're going to do a very good job at sieging down the enemy, especially since this revolution has a card that will let you upgrade your howitzers to Imperial howitzers. So if you're a Italian player that loves your siege and just wants to destroy the enemy, but you also want to have a more mobile option, then this is the revolution for you. Especially if you plan on playing on the more wide open maps like Eurasian Steppe, where artillery can take forever to reach the enemy, but your Granaderos can run in and quickly throw their grenades all over the enemy's falconets, then run in and throw grenade all over the enemy's base, like a proverbial grenade bukkake, or however you want to put it in flowery language. Argentina gives you the ability to completely wreck the opponent's base while giving you the option to stay mobile. And yes, since they're also very good at destroying buildings, this is another revolution that you can use to dunk on the Maltese, since the Maltese are overly reliant on buildings, and this revolution is rather good at destroying buildings. Next up we have the Brazil Revolution. With the Brazil Revolution, as soon as you revolt, every one of your settlers will turn into 2 Voluntario de Patria, and also if your pop ever drops below 200, then all of your town centers will start training up a free batch of 9 Voluntario de Patria, so if you want to completely bury the enemy under a swarm of infantry, then this is the revolution for you. And if by some miracle they're able to survive your super swarm of infantry, with this revolution, you also gain other useful tools, such as the Jacuno, which act a lot like the Lakota Musket Riders, only the difference is that they only cost food, and they only take up 1 pop, but they're a bit weaker, but you know, they're still amazing, and they don't take a negative multiplier when they're attacking villagers. You can also send a card that turns your normal Dragoons into Independence Dragoons. This is useful because Independence Dragoons have a very, very powerful melee attack, so they can kill almost anything in a few hits. The only trade-off is that they lose their normal multipliers once they go into melee mode, but all that means is that they'll be dealing like 50 melee damage to enemy cavalry instead of dealing something crazy like 200 melee damage to enemy cavalry per hit. What this means is that they turn into an all-rounder melee cavalry once you switch them into melee mode, so it's like a Dragoon and a Hussar all rolled into one unit. This is very useful for the Italians because the Italians' Dragoons are otherwise lackluster, whereas once you send this card, they actually turn into something worth using. And of course, with Brazil, you have the normal cards that you see with South American revolutions, such as Ironclads as well. So it's not a bad pick for water maps, even though for most water maps you're going to want to go with Barbary States instead. However, if a super swarm of infantry and some pretty powerful dragoons is more of your style, then the Brazil Revolution is still on the table. Last but not least, we have the United States Revolution. The United States Revolution isn't the best option for offense because it mainly just gives you a bunch of skirmishers, and the Italians already have offensive skirmishers in spades. However, if you were trying to fight a defensive war, then I would say that the United States Revolution would be a good pick, because you have infinite forts, and after you send the right card, every time that you build a fort, you would end up getting 2 Gatlings, and after you send another card, you can go ahead and get 4 sharpshooters every time you build a fort, and after you send another card, your forts will gain the ability to train Minutemen, and your Minutemen will no longer lose HP. So if you're a defensively minded Italian player, then the United States Revolution isn't a bad choice. On the offensive side, however, I would say that you have better options. That said, if you really want to hammer someone down as the US-Italian Revolution, you can do it, because the revolution gives you access to a ton of native units, as well as your swarms of Minutemen that you can train from forts now, on top of all of the other units that you can train. But if you want to completely ball down the enemy, I recommend that you go with the Barbary States Revolution instead, and keep the American Revolution as more of a defensive option if you really need it. So if you're playing the Italians, then you have several revolution options. You have the Argentina Revolution if you want to really destroy the enemy's base, and you want those Imperial mortars, and you want those mounted grenadiers. Then if you're on a water map, or you're playing against Malta, then I recommend that you go with the Barbary States Revolution instead, because the Barbary States Revolution has a lot of cards that are very useful for water maps, and also anytime you destroy a building, you get that gold bounty after you send that card that also gives you an explorer. So the Barbary States Revolution is a great option if you're on a water map, or you're going against Malta. Brazil Revolution, on the other hand, gives you a giant swarm of units and lets you spawn free ones from all of your town centers, so it's a great revolution if you just want to give your opponent the middle finger and hit them with a giant never-ending swarm of Voluntario de Patria. Then you have the United States Revolution, which is a good choice if you want to play defensively, since the United States Revolution gives you access to revolutionaries, Klamath Riflemen and Sharptooth Bowmen, and Minutemen from forts, and also your sharpshooters from forts, and Gatlings, so you can shoot up anyone that tries to step on your turf. I hope that this very short and very rough overview of these revolutions available to you as the Italians will help you on your journey. Now go out there, have fun, and arrivederci, my friends.